please welcome Angela Todd.
Thank you, everybody. So I'm one of those women that's always talking to little old ladies in the grocery store. My kids hate it. I'm always looking for where the women are, what their stories are. My degrees are in women's history and cultural studies, and that's part of the focus that got me started on this presentation tonight. And I will tell you a little more about myself as we get started here. So once upon a time, I worked in a botanical archive in Pittsburgh, and I was at the archive for 18 years, and I was in Pittsburgh for 30 years. And I miss Pittsburgh in some ways, I have to admit. So I worked in a repository of alternate resort, which means this guy down in the corner with the blue shirt, Ron Stuckey, he worked at The Ohio State University as a botanist, studying water plants. And then he got a little distracted by this beech tree in his yard, and he started studying that beech tree, and then his mentor died, and he wanted to write a biography, and then he got interested in all the other students of his mentor. Well, The Ohio State University has a collection schedule, and they said, Ron, none of that stuff fits into the water plants that we hired you to generate data on. We don't want it. So he brought it to the Hunt Institute. Many botanists did. We said yes. We always said yes. And I learned in that job how fragile history is. There are a lot of great collections in that archive. Everything has a hook, right? It doesn't belong anywhere else easily. So we got it, and that was great. And over my 18 years, Ron in the blue shirt came. Rogers McLaw was at UNC, and he studied, can't remember what. Walter Hodge went to Dominica during World War II to look for a plant substitute for rubber with his girlfriend, who became his wife. She typed his dissertation, did all the seed separating and packaging, and right? So you see where my interests are in sort of these peripheral characters. But anyway, in those 18 years, I had one woman think that she had a collection that should be saved, and she brought it to me at the Hunt Institute. And it was the documentation around her sexual discrimination suit against her university. And she didn't think they'd keep it. So I learned a lot in that job, as I said. And I loved it until it became really about data migration and geomapping and things that I want to research, not do that kind of stuff. So this is a presentation about a Jewish family escaping oppression in the Russian Empire. I gave this talk at the library in October, and I'm giving it again today. And again, I'm going to ask you, I'll choke up for a moment of silence. You just send some peaceful vibes, energy, prayers, whatever you do, to the Middle East, who is still stuck in cycles of terrorism and anti-terrorism. So join me. I hope the next time I give this talk, I can take my slide out. So, I found the Klains walking my dog Zip down in front of the Guy Rose School. And all those war monuments are there, and now you know that I'm interested in women's history. And I always stop and read the war monuments because in the early days, of course, during the Civil War, the women went with their husbands if there were no kids to keep them home. So I like to see, where they're never named, they're the wives, but I saw Esther's name listed for World War I, and there aren't many women, and I thought, okay, Esther Klain, I'm going to remember that. And I went and searched on her, and I just fell in love with the whole family story. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where history lives, and I'm going to show you which categories I've used in this presentation. One is the public information that we get from genealogy platforms. Probably most of you in this room are subscribed to one. So they buy data sets and serve it back to you. Publish things from the library, and they were really helpful. And public documents at the Historical Society. So like a city directory is not the same as a published book that's in circulation. And Charles helped me find an insurance map that was really helpful. And then, of course, my favorite, archives, family items and things that flesh out the personality and the So the things that I got from genealogy platforms were records from the federal government, schools, military, state governments, churches, and my ancestry, I have the bump up for the newspapers. But you probably know that the federal government had a building burned down and the 1890 census was lost in that. You may also know that in the 1970s, a military records facility burned down in the South, and they just lost a lot of documentation around people that fought in Korea and Vietnam. And if you have people like that and you're interested in helping them recreate some of that information, hit me up and I'll connect you to the project. Schools are included, high school yearbooks, but not our Norway high school yearbooks. I think, first of all, it is only public schools, so no private schools are included that I know of. And I think either the run was too small, or the population was too small, or they didn't sell it to the right people. So there's some reason that, it's not just that we have access to everything. It feels like it, but we don't. And genealogy platforms are one of my pet projects, and I take them down a notch. Because I think they make people think they don't have to save archives, and we still do. Churches, when you get ready to sign up for one, if you want the Lutheran records or the Catholic records or the Baptist records, look at your platform before you sign up, because they buy and sell different sets of data and nobody has everything. So the churches are one in particular that may really impact your search. And so I heard y'all talking about Bess Klain. She's not the major focus of this project, but these two pictures of her are from the school yearbooks, the later ones. So the early ones, I did find a couple bound copies at the library, and it'll show up in this presentation. Okay, so this is the Klain family tree that I built in Ancestry. It's just a skeleton to help me figure out who was who. That big long line is all the kids and their spouses. The red markers are the kids that worked in a military capacity. And there's one with a question mark on it, and that was Dora Klain. And she worked in a factory making uniforms for the military. Some people count her, some people don't. I think what she did was important. We don't want those boys going to war naked. So Morris and Rebecca are the parents. That's who we're going to start with. They were both born in Vilna, which was part of the Russian Empire when they left. It was part of Poland later, back to Russia, and right now it's the capital of Lithuania. So as you go through the census records and they say, I was born in Russia, I was born in Poland, I was born in Russia. So it should probably match that city changing hands. And that's a good thing to keep in mind if you're on one of these projects. And then that box down below, I tried to figure out how long it took them to get different places. Okay, so Morris came in 1884. Rebecca came 5 years later on ship with 3 little kids. My hat's off to her. They were part of a bigger wave, of course, of Jews fleeing the oppression in the Russian Empire. So I couldn't quite see or gather. I didn't spend a lot of time looking for information when they first landed. And it is a little fuzzy as we go later. But Rebecca got here in 1889 and Esther was born in 1890. So they connected. All right. And then, so the records show that Esther was born in Norway. There's this newspaper article announcing twins born to the wife of Mr. Morris Klain in 1892. Those were the 2 boys. And Esther was one of a set of twins too. Dora was her twin sister. And then there's this article in the Portland paper where Morris Klain wants to let a farm. So he wants to rent a farm a few miles from Portland, from the city. And the return address is Monument Street in Portland. He had a brother. I'm not sure where the brother was. Maybe that's his address, but it seems a little unclear that they're here to stay or if they want to get back to Portland. And the confusion goes on, I'm afraid. In 1895, this ad shows up in the Oxford Democrat. They're still in Norway. Morris Klain is a junk dealer, and my experience with Jewish family history is mostly other city families. So I worked with a family in New York and a family in Pittsburgh, And those peddler stories are usually peddlers getting things from the city and selling them, moving out to the suburbs or the rural areas and selling them to families that don't have easy access to shops. But that is not what Morris is doing. He says, I can afford to pay you the going rate for all your rags, newspaper, rubber, tin, whatever, because I sell it directly to the factory. So he's actually buying from the townspeople, which kind of threw me. And he says that because he sells directly to the factory, he can pay top dollar. So he's putting himself in a different category. And this is where this presentation focuses a little more on the parents and less on the war. So they're not exactly what I thought. And I'll explain more as we go through. He had a storefront on Water Street. Don't know if he rented it or if he bought it. He said, come to me on Water Street. And then this long piece down here is a little story that he adds to his advertisement, where he says, I went to an old man's house and the old man said, give me my meal bag back. And Morris says, you talking about Grandpa? And he says, you took my meal bag last summer and I want it back. And Morris says, I have proof to show you I was not in the rag business last summer. So they solve it and go on their way. And then the last paragraph, he says, this is just to show that some peddlers don't care if they're square traders or not. So he's set himself apart from the rest by saying he's got a storefront, he'll pay top dollar, and he's a square dealer. So I think, wow, he was not some poor uneducated immigrant. This guy's got it going on. So that was 1895. Also in 1895, their son Peter was born in South Portland. Peter died a few months later of whooping cough, also in South Portland. So I don't know if Rebecca went down, if they knew there was going to be trouble. She had some kids in Norway. I'm not sure why she went back to South Portland, who she would have stayed with. There's still lots of research to be done. But this Peter also was buried in Deering. So I know that the Jewish cemetery, Mount Sinai, they had plots there, and that's on like Warren Avenue. And what I think of as Deering is down, like almost behind the post office, kind of, or whatever. So the dates remain fuzzy to me, but by the 1900 census, they are on record as living in Norway on Main Street, 19 Main Street. They don't stay there forever. This is the census record that holds them. You can see this middle column. First 5 people are from Russia. Everybody else is born in Maine. Morris up the top here is still listed as a peddler, and so is his son Israel. Show you the other side of the same record, I think. Oh, no. And so that was 1900, and then in 1907, he's got this ad showing up in the paper, and he ran this every 2 weeks for months and months. So they're not at the poor scrabbling income level that I thought they were, which to me was exciting to break through what I had in my head as a stereotype. So this article says, Sue and I are on a goose chase. Sue solved it. He bought the old Marshall Gibbs place, and Sue looked at some deed records and some maps and determined that it's down Main Street where his other property is, or maybe this is the property, I'm not sure what order things came in. So where Sanborn Circle is, down across from Obashan Hardware, right down there, across from Obashan, that was farmland, and that was their farm. So thank you for your help, Sue, as always. So then in the 1910 census, they're listed as 30 Main Street rather than 19. And this is one census. The questions aren't the same every time they conduct it. And they asked women this year how many births they had and how many living children they had. And this year, they're trying to actually estimate how immigration was impacting our population and what immigrant fertility was like, so that they could decide whether to lift the bans or clamp down on the bans. One year they asked if you had a radio. It's like in the 30s, because the president was thinking about making radio addresses. So they're not the same every year. The questions tell us a lot about what's going on. So they've got these 11. They're the 2 girls, 2 twin boys, and they have another son named Peter. So in a lot of families, there's, in the early days, I don't see much this day, but there's a compulsion to give the name till it sticks, so they live out of childhood. And I think what I know about Judaism, they try to name it after the person most recently passed, at least the first letter. So it might not be the exact name, but they would both begin with P or L or whatever.
So is the David Klain insurance agency here?
It's this family, but he's not a sibling. I think he's the next generation.
Next generation.
Yeah. There is a David, but I think he's the next David. Okay, and also here we see that Morris is a farmer with his own farm. Israel is a poultry farmer with his own farm. That's something in 1910. And this is Esther. She's about 20 at this time, listed as no job at this moment. But it didn't stay that way for long. Whoops. We're going to talk about Peter first. So this is the second Peter. He left high school early and planned to come back in June and graduate with his friends, but he enlisted. He got moved to Biddeford, where he was guarding train tracks to make sure the enemy didn't, sabotage or contaminate. And he was killed in an accident just months into his service, sadly. He was guarding a bridge there. This little article talks about Morris and 2 of his brothers coming to identify the body. News was pretty emotional back in the day. So here's Peter. He's buried at St. Sinai. I don't know if the other Peter is or not. And when I found his grave on Find a Grave, I was heartened to see that, I don't know when the pictures were taken, but the people added them on the same year. So that they had a cleanup project of some kind. And this little round thing here is a marker of veteran service. And it wasn't there in this picture, but I had to crop out that part. So he's remembered still, and that made me happy, and hopefully his little brother's there with him. And then we come to my beloved pet Esther. She was born in 1890, as we've discussed, died in 1947, and I love the spinsters. I'm not one, but in my next life I might be. So that whole thing of born and died in her family home, I think, oh, baby. But she's another one that tricked me. So she made it to the paper for the first time in 1910. She's 20. Somebody got sick, so Esther's going to work at the Advertiser. The next we hear about her is 8 years later. She also left school early to go to nursing training. And she was, I can't believe she was 28 years old, and she was the superintendent of the hospital. So the announcement is about her resigning her job so that she can go be an Army nurse. And the other thing I'm interested in this family is how much the government, not props them up, but sort of acknowledges their sacrifice. So they've got flags with stars, they've got awards, the family gets noted in all kinds of different ways. 5 sons and a daughter. That's a lot of contributions. Isn't she sweet? So her birth record is signed later, and I didn't catch the date on this, by probably her brother, David, who was the town clerk, but maybe it was the next generation David, I'm not sure. But you know, in rural life, when we're not born in hospitals, the paperwork can be filed later, years later sometimes. So this picture of her was in the Sunday paper. She was awarded really quickly after she entered the, let me see if I can pronounce it in French, Croix de Guerre, which is the Cross of War. She nursed on the front lines. And World War I nurses were given like militia gunmanship training so that they'd be prepared to shoot for their patients to protect them and save them. So she fought in 2 different frontline situations. One was right behind the Hun line, so I figured that's Germany, and the other one was TOUL. That be France? My World War I geography is not that great. So I thought, oh, that's nice. She's, you know, doing her part and getting awarded. That's nice, and I moved on. And then just this week, I stumbled onto this book listing. This book is for sale for $250. It was a presentation copy inscribed to Esther. It was given to her by the trustees of the base hospital, number 44, that she was attached to. And it was a reward or an acknowledgement of her bravery and her service. And inside that book, there's this picture. These are the nurses. And Esther's in there, but I just found it this week. I haven't had time to figure out which one's her. But look at their hats, and they're all wearing skirts, and they look very toasty, all bundled up too. So that was an exciting last-minute find. But she ended up being a world traveler. So this is a picture of her passport from Ancestry. That's the passport photo enlarged. And she would have been 34 there. She looks like a teenager, doesn't she? And she's still making the paper. She's 38, and they're reporting that she's going to the Philippines. She stayed in the Army. She traveled most of her life. So this is the passenger list for her taking this big Army transport from China to San Francisco. Her home base was San Francisco for a few decades. First class, nice. And these are her travels. She literally circled the globe. This small town spinster, born and died in her family home. I'm telling you, that's the group to watch. Her brother Jacob was drafted. He was at Colby, he was a baseball player, and when he was drafted, there's no end to the newspaper articles about how it has wrecked the baseball college scene for this year, and what are we gonna do, and everything's tossed up in the air. It's not gonna be right, he got them this far, blah, blah, blah. He also was not in the military for long. He was a dispatcher sent to the front lines, and on his third trip to the front, he was seriously wounded and gassed, and spent months in the hospitals recovering. But he must have recovered because he went back to Colby, and he graduated, and he went to work for the United Fruit Company, which I know about from my job in the botany archives. So they were, well, I won't sidetrack you with the United Fruit Company. So there's a great handwritten announcement of marriage between him and his wife in Guatemala. I don't know if she's Guatemalan or not, in Spanish. So that was an Ancestry, and I was delighted to find it. So we did go back to Colby and finish. So his travels are in black, and you see the parents have that green line up there, and Esther's in red, Jacob is in black. He went to the front, but then most of his travel was for the United Fruit Company down here in Central and South America. I haven't done all the kids, we'd be here all night. And this is Zora. And Zora, I don't know if he enlisted or if he was drafted, but he was a censor. So he didn't travel all over the place, but he also doesn't get written up in the lists of men at war. And I don't know if that's because he didn't see fighting action or because his job was a secret. So he did come back, he got a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. He taught all over the place. He ended up at the New Jersey Women's College permanently. And he proposed, it's hanging off the slide there. He proposed teaching religion in schools, not as kind of like a morality thing, but he wanted it like almost a history of philosophy so that we could examine men's relationships to universal ideas, which I thought was pretty interesting. So those are his travels. He did get a fellowship or something to go to Hungary. He's in purple, but most of his jobs at his, for the Army or military, he stayed in DC, and then his teaching was mostly east of Mississippi. And Zora is another one to help me show the downfall of the genealogy platform. So when they buy and share these data sets, machines read them, right? Optical character recognition is what it's called. And he gets rendered as Laura all the time. So it's just another way. I know AI is on the scene, but they're never gonna outpace us human brains. I promise, I hope. So I did find some things in the library that helped me make my presentation. This is all the Mainers in the World War. Oh, but wait, no, it's only the men, sorry. And so Abraham, David, and Jacob are listed there. Peter is listed there. But Zora is still not, and Esther's not, and Dora isn't. And this was a great book. If anybody has an interest in Jews in Maine, she focuses on Mount Desert Island, Calais, and Bangor. And it was so enlightening that, you know, I'm from the county, and I thought, oh, there probably weren't Jews up there. But I learned just because there are no temples doesn't mean there are no Jews. And this happened in the city. I don't know why I didn't think it happened up in Aroostook County. But they would meet, you know, in the back office of a restaurant, or they would start a little congregation in somebody's living room. And there were pockets of people all over the place. And there are a lot of summer camps all over the state. So that was a great book. The library also had some bound copies of Caduceus, which is the Norway yearbook before it was
Oxford Hills.
Before it was Oxford Hills. That's not absorbed into Ancestry. It was either too early, too small, it hasn't been digitized, I don't know why. Excuse me. And the history of Norway on the top there, that wasn't helpful for my family in particular, but it gave me a good sense of what everybody was doing for work and what the area was like. So that was a good background. So the Historical Society had these two great documents, and I love the city directory because they keep track of everybody. So you'll see that Harmon moved to Portland, and so did Mrs. Harmon. Jacob was at Colby College at that time. Oh, I thought I stuck another arrow on here. Where's Israel? Oh, I did. So look, they all live at 30 Main Street. And then he's listed here. This is the first time I've seen it at 32 Main Street. So that Gibbs Place must have been right next door or the original or something. So they've got a little farming community they're starting, which I think is so cool. So they keep track of everybody, where they are, moved to such and such, and now he's a junk dealer, dressmaker, whatever. So Charles helped me find this. Thank you, Charles. And this is, oh, I need a pointer. So that top arrow on the left points to the silo, and that top arrow on the right points to the hen house. And later in the presentation, I do have an announcement that I found. Bess Klain is going to be having music students, and I think she's at 29 or 28 Main Street. So I don't know if all those three buildings are theirs in 1924, but those two are. So there's a farm right on Main Street. I think that's great. So I'm just going to review quickly. Public documents, newspapers, ancestry newspapers, library, and the Historical Society public holdings. And so what's missing are still archives. Maybe everybody in this room knows what an archive is. A few years ago, Bob Dylan gave his archive to the University of Oklahoma at Tulsa. People were shocked. They could not figure it out. But they had Arlo Guthrie's papers, so they're going to focus on folk music and start collecting in that direction. The National Archives, you may recall, is where all the presidential classified documents are supposed to be. The New York Public Library is getting Joan Didion's papers. She wrote The Year of Magical Thinking about taking care of her husband as he died. And Norwegian.
The year after he died, actually went cotton and survived it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Obviously, I haven't read it.
Yeah, that's the magical thinking part.
Ah, would you recommend it?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Norwegian scientists are using archives to show the impact of climate change. So they're using specimens and reports of, water heights and all the things. I went looking for Klain family archives here in this building, and there are some. I was so excited. Thank you, Sue, Charles. Including this genealogy where Peter W. Klain died in World War I in 1917. His brother had a child at the end of 1917 and named it Peter William. So that Peter lives on, at least in my heart. This was actually the first thing I found when I looked for Esther. This is this main Portland Sunday Telegram. This photograph is the family's collection. Pardon me?
I like that.
It is very cool. And you can see that there are fingerprints, water stains, it's tattered, it's folded. I can just imagine them looking it over, showing it to people, meeting new friends and showing it to them, remembering Peter. It's very moving to me, and I'm delighted that they've captured the use that this copy got, because that's part of the story that it tells. I think it was Brian Spears that gave this collection, and the photos give a whole different personality to the family. It's not just, I'm going to buy your rags, and I'm going to keep having babies, and we're all going to struggle, and we're farming, and, you can see this is Bess, actually. This girl with long hair. She's misidentified here. Clearly that's the mom. And she's smiling and happy, and she and her dad are wrangling a horse. She's got a milk bucket in that other picture. It helps put personality on the family history, but also the town history, the history of the war, what these people left behind when they went off. They must have been really drawn to the cause, right? To leave all this behind. I don't know who the two little girls are, but they must be cousins or sisters, and they obviously have an intimate relationship. And there's Bess posing by the rhododendron, which from what I hear sounds like something she would do. So even with all of this, the archive story is not done. Documenting Maine Jewry is an organization in Portland, and they have those photos that we showed and more. I could not get permission from them to use them in this presentation in time. I might have snuck in this one from Vivian Akers because he's a hometown guy, and I thought it would be okay. So while I'm getting these inklings right about my misunderstanding about the family, I come across this, and that's Rebecca posing for a formal portrait, all dressed up with her pearls. And it's like the thing that clinched it to me. They've got a couple homes and a storefront. They've got beautiful portraiture. There may be more somewhere. That would be great to find. And then I remembered that his father was a doctor in Russia. That's on Ancestry. But before that is all back in Russia. That's outside my skill set. So his father was born in 1835, which is almost 200 years ago. And here we are trying to work it out. And we've got a lot of information, but what they saved changes everything. It really gives the feel of the moment and the family. And I think it adds something to the story of World War I also. Morris and Rebecca were on the front page of the Portland paper again for their golden wedding anniversary. This came in after I finished my talk at the library. It gives a rundown on every kid, where they are, what they're doing, pictures of him and her. There was also a copy in the Lewiston paper, but there's no photo, so I've shown you this one. And she died in 1940, he died after her, and they are in Portland together at Mount Sinai. I'll get there one day and check out where everybody is. And yet there's more. So these square nails were donated, it says on the tag, by Joyce Klain Wilson, who must be somebody in the next generation. Now I need your help with this because I think I remember somebody saying that he made the nails. Anybody? All right, well, I'll be searching that out later. But those were the barn nails that they used, and I really appreciate that they were saved. This, I think, came from Bess's estate. It's the announcement that she's going to start taking music students 30 Main Street. So she was still in her father's house until her studio could be ready, which she said would be ready in September 1st, 1929. So we're getting up there. Bess is teaching. And this is my favorite. Isn't that a great picture of her? And I'd never met her, but I've heard some stories, and I think the wallpaper really represents her personality. She's sitting, I think, at her piano. She's got the laughing and probably the crying drama masks. And she's surrounded by the pictures of her friends and family, students maybe. Oh, I'm sorry. And I just think it's wonderful. She's laughing, she looks happy. Love the gold lampshade.
Red lipstick.
Right.
Yeah, always has red lipstick.
Did she?
Yeah.
And blue Singer cheese.
Yeah. Well, I wish I had met her. And this is also from her estate. I don't know what they're doing. I do not know what they're doing. I thought they were maybe putting on a show. Then the red arrow on the bottom, that's Bess, backwards. So there's the front and the back. She's got one pant leg rolled up. They're all laughing. They're wearing crazy clothes. I don't know if they were putting on a play or just goofing around or going out dancing. I don't know. But it would be fun to discover more. She had a band, 10 men and a girl. And I don't think these are from her estate. I think somebody else donated these. Which also shows that whatever you got, it's never too late to donate it. And there's still a lot more to be done on the Klains. So there are newspaper articles about all kinds of things at the opera house or dances here and there. Somebody's singing, Bess is always playing the piano. But they're involved in a lot of social groups that I haven't gone into at all. And to cover all the kids and all the schools and colleges that they went to, that could be a life's work right there. And Jewish temples down in Portland, I don't know what the connection was there, but I'd love to know more about the ease of travel and what the thing was that she kept going back and forth. Maybe they all did, I don't know. So I mentioned some archival projects at the beginning, and I think I've talked enough already about what archives added to this story. But I do want to look at a little bit at World War I. So there is a clamshell box here in this building that was really exciting for me to look at. This is Peter William, the one that died in Biddeford. And I don't know who, sorry, I'm not blocking here. I don't know who the donor was, and I don't know if this Leona Sloan maybe was the one. I don't think it was her that put it all together. That's Peter in the middle and the American flag. And those two long newspaper columns are like a heart-wrenching story of his remembrance service here in Norway. And it was over either at the high school or the fairgrounds, but in that place right there. And it tells about Morris hiking up the flag, and it's really amazing. And it says a lot about what patriotism used to be and why people were joining the war and things that we don't think about or think about the same way, I think, now. So that was a fascinating thing to find. I don't know if it was a friend or girlfriend or what. And then this is, there's no letter inside, but to see the envelope ripped open, taped up, tattered, stamped, that's what Zora did all day. So that was a good find. I was appreciative of that. And the souvenirs, I don't know. I imagine them bringing them back from Rebecca. I imagine Esther giving them to all her girlfriends. But there were souvenirs coming back from the war, and there probably always are. These are on the right here is a handkerchief, and these cards, if my memory serves, they're framing handkerchiefs behind them. So photos came home, and Kodak did finish production of their little pocket camera in time for the boys to take it to war. And so they had them made into postcards and sent home. You could also buy mass-produced images of the front lines, artillery, I'm sure countryside scenes, but this particular collection is German artillery. Oh, and this is my favorite, maybe because my grandmother has a thing like this about World War II. She has a scrapbook. But this woman kept a list of all the boys, who got drafted, who enlisted, where they went, when their training ended, where they went after that, what happened to them when they came home. And she has all different kinds of black and blue pen and pencil. And this article is about Jacob being gassed, spending all those months in the hospital. That's where I learned it. I don't know why it didn't show up in the newspaper search, but it didn't. And so there's always room for more information. Whew, so that's it. And I'm so passionate about archives because I do seriously believe that we all belong, that the story is never complete, and it maybe never will be. So if you have archival needs, hit me up. I've worked in people's homes getting their things organized. I love to speak, as you can tell. And I have workshops on archiving your special needs kids or photo preservation or anything that you want me to talk about, I will, practically. Thank you. Does anybody have questions? Make them easy. Does anybody have questions or stories about the Klains? I know you all have stories about Bess. And one of you is going to sing.
I gotta reconsider that.
I remember when you did your October talk, you talked about how the family got here, transportation-wise, they walked here, I believe is what you told us.
Well, they could have walked, they could have, well, now that I think they're not eking, poor immigrants like with the stereotype that I thought they were, now I think they probably hired a buggy or something. So, yeah, but there was a lot of walking, it could have been that. Especially the back and forth bits. How many times could they hire a buggy? Maybe they owned one. I don't even know that. Yeah, anybody else?
Are there any claims here from that family?
I don't know. I don't think there are many left in town, at least not with the last name Klain, but I think Sue could probably talk to that better than I
Not to my knowledge. I know that there are descendants elsewhere because they write to us with questions.
Right.
Not my knowledge.
Which is interesting because they were such a force. I mean, front page of the paper over and over, and not for the bad stuff.
Aren't there descendants who just don't have that last name, but they're directly related to the family?
There certainly could be, but of course, Bess Klain, the youngest, never married. Her older brother, David Klain, Joyce Klain Wilson, who gave
The nails.
Yes.
Yeah.
Joyce is David's daughter, and she has recently passed away. I think she lived in Indiana, I think.
But moved to out west, maybe Seattle, at the end to be with us.
That's right. That's right. But if there are direct descendants who now have a different name, we don't know.
I mean, because I live right next to the Klain camp, which is the name of the grandfather of these people.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's this family.
I would make a guess, knowing where you live, but that might have been David and Adeline Klain's camp.
Yeah.
Possibly. Was
I
it?
think that's right.
Yeah.
There's a fellow named Jim Haskell that lives here. He owns that camp. And Joyce Wilson had a sister who married Colwyn Haskell from Bethel.
Yes. Yeah.
And Jim
That's right.
Jim is his
Yeah.
And
son.
Kathy Davis.
Kathy Davis is the sister.
So they are related to the
Yeah.
family.
Oh, yes,
They're just
direct descendants.
And I know that Morris had a brother, and at one point there's a newspaper article that they're in Rumford and his son is killed. Then there's another article that he's in a little legal trouble in Portland for stealing and trying to resell something. And Abram has a son also named Israel. It got a little confusing, so, but I don't think it's the same Israel.
Well, my dad's cousin, Mark, married Virginia Klain, and she was a niece of Bess, who, she grew up in South Portland. Her daughter Holly couldn't be here tonight because she was up in Jackman. I told her about it, but she couldn't be here. She could tell you more about it, but Virginia she's passed away, but I remember her very well as a kid, and moved to Norway, and her husband Mark called me up and said, "You moved to Norway, I have to introduce you to Bess, Aunt Bess." And I said, "Who's she?" So that picture of her, he took us over to Bess's house. We heard her play the piano, and we met her canary, and
And that house has musical notes in the shutters, right?
I don't remember, but
She left.
G-class, yeah.
yeah.
I remember my dad pointing it out, but I don't remember much beyond that. So, and that was the South Portland connection, so I'd love to figure out what that is.
I mean, I could have asked Holly who her grandfather was. I don't know, but that's where I knew Virginia grew up in South Portland.
Yeah. Huh, interesting.
There was a CD going around for a while, it was before I moved to Norway, of an oral history of Bess. I don't know if you have that.
Oh, we have a copy and it's on cassette, and I went through my garages, but I couldn't find a cassette player.
The Historical Society will have a cassette player tomorrow.
We'll all come back tomorrow night and listen together.
That's great. Very good.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you very much for
Thank you.
coming.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
delighted to be here. And as I get more research done, maybe I'll beg to come back.
Could you please, I'm sorry, I don't have my phone with me, so I can't take it note, but what was the name of the book of history of Jews and Maine? Crossing Lines?
Yeah, it was Judith Goldstein.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was Crossing Lines, but I can't remember the subtitle. I think it's Communities in Bangor, Cowles, and Mountain Desert Island, and it is in our local.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, it's good. Last column. Eat up, everybody.